Hello there all my lovely jewelry makers, I'm Christina of CSLdesigns, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make these multi-row Viking knit bracelets. Now you can achieve many different variations. I'm just going to show you the basic technique and they can really end up looking very elegant. Now like usual, these pieces will be available for sale in my shop along with other jewelry kits and tutorials. There's going to be a link in the description box down below. Otherwise, if you want to learn how you can make one for yourself, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we're going to need. The wire that I'm using is a regular round silver coated copper wire and the gauge is a 0.4 mil. And then we need some beads. The ones I'm using are rainbow coated faceted hematite gemstone beads and they're 3mm. But of course you can easily use different sizes and shapes depending on the look that you want. And then we'll also need a clasp. The one I've got here is a magnetic one and the specific hole size on this clasp is a 12 by 6mm. Now of course that can vary depending what you need for yours. And then we need a couple of pliers, so I've got my flush cutters here to cut our wire with, and then some chain nose pliers to help manipulate the wire. Now of course we also need a Viking knit tool, so this is a homemade one that I made and I'm using 6 loops, but of course you can easily make your Viking knit different. And I already have a tutorial where I show how you can make your own tool as well, so I'll leave a link to that in the description box down below. We're going to need a drawer plate to get the Viking knit to the size we want, and then some glue to be able to attach our clasp. So we're going to start by making our Viking knit, and for that we need to cut a length of our wire. Whatever you're comfortable working with is fine, but I'm using about 1.5 meters or so, but it doesn't matter because we can add in new wire anyway. And then of course we need our actual Viking knit tool as well. Like I mentioned, this one has 6 loops and the rod I'm using is just an 8mm crochet hook, but again it doesn't have to be that specific size. You can easily make it different depending on how you want yours to look. So once we have our tool ready, then I'm going to take one end of our wire here, and first of all I want to bring it through one of the loops. So I'm just going through from the left to right and from the back to front. And then I'm just going to have the short little tail, bring it down and hold it against the rod with my thumb, and then bring the long end of the wire here over the top of it and over towards the right. So this is just my starting point. You can easily work in the opposite direction. And then we want to make our way all the way to the end of the wire here. And we then need to go through the next loop. In this case I'm just going through from the front to back and now from right to left. And we then want to make sure that it goes over the top of itself and then just pull it all the way through until it's almost tight here, and then we just want to make another loop as we're pulling it tight. And I like to put my thumb on there so it kind of holds the distance between the 2 loops and the tool and make that as even as possible. And you can see we kind of created a little bridge now between the 2 loops. And then we just want to get to the end of the wire again and basically just continue like this all the way around. So move to the next loop in the tool, take the end, go down through the loop again from front to back and right to left in this case, the same as we just did before. This is going to be the same movement now. And again, make sure it comes over the top of itself. Pull it all the way through until it's almost tight. And again, put your thumb on there while tightening the loop. And then we have another little bridge between the loops there. So you can see we're connecting them all the way around until we make it all the way back to the beginning. So now I'm back at the beginning here. You can see we're just missing the last little bridge to connect those 2 loops. And what I'm going to do is take the end of the wire and just go behind the very first loop that we made. So not through any loops, but just literally behind it. And then pull it all the way through, which then creates that bridge, and then also the next loop in the next row here. So this is now what we're going to keep doing, and this is just going to be the single Viking knit. So I'm just going to literally go behind the next loop, come out on the other side of it and pull the wire all the way through. And in this case here, it's now creating another bridge underneath the first one, as you can see, but it's the same principle. We just keep going like this, get to the end of the wire, go behind the next loop and pull it out on the other side and all the way through. And this is literally the technique from now on, working our way around and around and around the rod until we obviously have the whole length that we need. Now you're going to find at some point you'll run out of the wire that you're using and you'll have to add in a new length of wire, which is why it doesn't really matter how long a length you're working with because we can keep adding more in. Now I already have a tutorial where I show how to do the basic Viking knit here with a bit more detail and also how to add in that new wire. So I'm going to leave a link to that in the description box down below. And also a tutorial on how to do the double and triple Viking knit, because you can easily use those techniques as well for this if you prefer the look of those. Everything will be in the description box, but otherwise just continue with this until we have the length that we need. So I now made my whole length of Viking knit here, and this length is about 40 centimeters long, so this might be more than what you'll actually need, but I'd rather have too much than too little. So what we can then just do is remove our mandrel, and what I then just want to do first of all is get rid of the tool on the other end, so you can literally just cut off the loops from the tool. Now I'm just cutting the actual loops in the tool itself, not in the Viking knit, and then just remove it. So we now only have our full length of Viking knit here. So what we need to do next is draw this through our draw plate so it gets the right size that we want and it neatens it up as well. And to be able to do that, we kind of want to create another little tool on this end. So the loops that are freed up from removing the other tool, I'm going to grab just some scrap lengths of wire. We need 3 in total in this case, and just put the length of wire through one loop and then through the loop that's just opposite it, and then just bring the ends up. And then take another length and put that through the next 2 loops opposite each other. And again, bring that straight up. And the same for the final 2 loops. Straight up, and then we can start to twist these together. So basically we create a little handle here to hold on to as we're drawing this through the draw plate. So just something a bit like that. And then grabbing the draw plate, what I'm going to do is find the one that's pretty much the same size as my knit here. So that's the largest side on this specific draw plate. And just kind of pull that through. And then what I can start to do is go down in size. So I'm just going to step down one size at a time and then pull the knit all the way through. It's still nice and easy. Go down another step and you'll find that it's going to start to get a bit tighter as we obviously step down in size, because the aim is to make it smaller. Step down another one. It's getting a bit tighter, and you're also going to start to see that it kind of changes the look of it and it neatens the whole thing up a bit. Now when it starts to get a bit tighter, I do like to go through the same step twice before I step down to the next one. And then you basically just want to keep going like this until you reach the size that you want yours to have. And obviously you can really stop at any point depending on how you want yours to look. So I've now reached what's going to be the last step for mine, and that's 4.5 in this case. So like I said, you can just stop at any point and pull that through. And again, I'm going to do that twice as well. And then I've ended up with a final length of Viking knit here, and I'm really happy with how it looks. Now regardless how you want yours to look, so you could easily make it much smaller than this, so draw it down to the smaller sizes there, but do bear in mind that's going to make it a lot tighter as well. So you do want to make sure that you have gaps in the Viking knit itself so you can get some wire through, as we're going to use that to attach the beads with. And for this we're going to cut a length of a 0.4 mil of about 2 meters. Now rather have too much than too little. You can also use shorter length, because if it does break you can always finish it off and add a new one as well, so that's completely up to you. Now because we're done with the draw plate, we can go in and cut off this little 2 that we attached. So get rid of that again. And then we basically want to get this into 2 separate lengths. So we can just meet up the 2 ends, and then we have the midpoint, and we can just cut through here. So just take your cutters and you just want to cut straight through your Viking knit. And then you will find that you lose little bits of wire here, so just make sure to get rid of those loose ends. So we then need to attach the length of wire to our Viking knit here. So I've got the 2 ends where I'm going to be starting, so just grab one of them here and then take the end of your 0.4 mil, and we basically want to attach this by going back and forth through it a few times. So start towards the end, and then you can just put a short length through and use that to go back and forth. So make sure when you go back through the Viking knit to the other side that you just step away from where it's coming out from. So we managed to grab onto some of the wire within the Viking knit, and it doesn't just pull straight out the other side. So grab the end and then pull that through, and then do that a few times until it's nicely secured. So now I have the wire securely attached here, and I have the long end sitting where I want the first bead to be. So I'm just going to add that to the wire and then let it drop all the way down, because they're going to sit in between the 2 lengths of Viking knit. So before we can attach the other one, obviously we just need to add that bead. And then I'm going to go all the way to the end of the wire and grab the other length of Viking knit that we have ready, and we basically want to then find the place that's equivalent on that to where the wire is coming out from. So just find a place to go through, again straight from one side to the other, and then just pull it all the way through here until we then bring it right up to sit next to the bead there, and it traps the bead in place between the two pieces of Viking knit. And basically what we need to do now is keep going back and forth, adding our beads in gradually and working our way up to the other end. So I'm coming out on this side here. I want to then step up a bit, so remember, make sure we step away from where the wire is coming out from, so we don't just pull it straight back through, and then come out on the opposite side here where we then want to add in the next bead. So just make sure we gauge that there's enough space to add in the bead, but we also don't want too much of a gap. And then pull that all the way back through again, and make sure we don't get any twisted wire or anything. So pull it through, and then I like to just give it a nice little tug while holding on to everything, just so we don't have any loose wire. And of course we then need to add the next bead before we can go through the opposite Viking knit, and let that drop all the way down. You can see it's going to sit nicely right there in between the two pieces. And then on the other side here, we want to then go through the equivalent side straight through the knit out on the other side of it, and then again gently pull it through, and make sure if we get any kinks forming like that, just undo it before you keep pulling. And then as we pull it down tighter, just make sure we also don't get any kinks or bends where the bead sits. So make sure you straighten it out as you go, and then pull it tight, and the bead is going to sit nicely just there, right next to the first one. So that is literally all there is to this. Grab the end of the wire again, and step away from where the wire is coming out, and then come out on the other side of it where the bead is going to fit in nicely next to the one we just added, and pull the wire all the way through. And I like to just give it that little tug there. What you can also do if you prefer is go through the same Viking knit a couple of times before we then add in the bead, and go to the other side and go through a couple of times and then go back and forth. That's completely up to you and what you prefer and what you find necessary. But then otherwise, drop in the bead, get to the end of the wire, and then just go through the Viking knit on the other side and pull it all the way through, and then pull it nice and tight. And there we have our third bead. So that is how you want to build it all the way until we have the length that we need. So now I made it all the way to the other end, and we've finished adding all the beads that we want. Then we need to get rid of this wire. So again, I'm just going to go back and forth in the same principle, and now just stick into one of the braids here and working my way down a little bit, just like when we started out when we attached the wire, just to make it nice and secure. And once we've done that a few times, we can go in and cut off the excess of the wire and just leave a short little tail. And then we just want to grab our pliers and basically bend it inwards and just get it tucked back into the braid, so that very end of the wire is not going to be sticking out. And we can also just finish off the wire on the other end in the same way. Now of course the ends we're left with here are way too long of the Viking knit, so we need to cut them down. What I like to do is cut them off longer than what they actually need to be, so we can always cut off more. And remember also that when we cut through, we are left with all these little bits that come out. So you just want to remove all those, and they also shorten the end a little bit compared to where you cut it, and you just want to leave space for that. So get rid of these little ends, and then you can see if the length fits, where if it doesn't, you can always cut off a little bit more, and that's where you can just go in and cut off a bit at a time instead of going all the way through the braid. That way you control it more, and do that until you get just the length that you want. And then of course you just want to cut off the other braid the same length. Now make sure you just start longer than what you actually want it, because like I said, this one will also get shorter as we remove those little bits, and you can always just gradually cut it down, and of course reach the same length of the one we already have. And then the final thing left to do is of course actually attach the clasp. Now it's not just going to stay on like that, so we need some glue, and that is where the E6000 comes in. So I'm just going to use a toothpick to apply it with, get some onto the toothpick, and then start to get it inside of the clasp here. So obviously the end where your piece is going to go into. Now we don't need to fill it up 100% because obviously some of the space will be taken up by the actual piece, so the excess will just come spilling out, but we do need to fill it up a decent amount though. Now I also like to take some of the glue here, either what's left on my toothpick or just add some more, and put it on the actual end of the bracelet that's going inside, and just make sure it goes in between the wires in all those nooks and crannies there, because then when we put the two pieces together and they adhere nicely, and obviously the glue dries, it's going to create a really strong bond. And then we can take our clasp and place it on the end, and there we go. Now of course you just need to do the same thing on the other end as well, and make sure if you have a clasp that's dependent on it that you place them in the right direction, and then you just need to leave them to dry, and then you'll have your finished bracelet. Now just to let you know how I made the 5-row bracelet here, in case you want to do the same or something similar, I made a 4-loop single Viking knit, and I made about 70 centimeters of that. I then drew that through the draw plate all the way to 3.5mm, and then I cut the Viking knit into 8-inch lengths that I then started attaching together with the beads as well, this time with a 2-meter length of wire. So you can see that's just another variation you can do of the same basic technique, and there's still so many more possibilities depending on the look that you want. So that is how you make these elegant multi-row Viking knit bracelets, and you can really achieve many different looks depending on your personal preference. Now if you want to see more Viking knit designs, I do have a playlist with all the tutorials I've done, but you can of course also check out my channel where I have tutorials within loads of different mediums. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and there is also a super thanks button below the video if you want to support me that way. Otherwise, I really hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.